Hello, and welcome to AP Table Talk, a podcast where we explore board games and what makes them interesting to us. My name is Brian, and I'm joined by my cousin Dave, who is also the reason why fruit roll-ups have a warning to remove the plastic before consuming. How's it going, Dave?
What's up, Brian? How's it going?
All right. Sounds like we both have a little bit of a recovery going on today, but
yeah,
I don't think that'll stop us too much.
That's true. I got to stop eating those fruit roll-ups with the plastic on, though. I just find it so delicious.
So what's our mechanic today?
All right. So for this episode of AP Table Talk, we're actually going to be talking about tech trees / tech tracks, but we'll just call it tech trees for this episode.
Okay. So I'll give my off the cuff definition here. So when I think of tech trees, I'm thinking of a game where throughout you are unlocking abilities or actions or some other improvement like stats or buildings that you can build, that kind of thing. But you gain them by kind of unlocking them sequentially or in a hierarchy if it's a tree, or like if it's a track, then just it's one after the other kind of thing. Generally, I think it's usually like researching technology is usually is a way that it's portrayed in games. I do associate this a lot with video games.
Yeah,
too. So
definitely.
I think there'll be some crossover talk in this episode.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Thanks, Brian. So I'm going to turn to the definition that's listed on Board Game Geek as of this recording. So under the tech tree / tech tracks definition, Board Game Geek lists it as, quote, during the course of the game, new actions become available to specific players or existing actions are improved. These are often themed as technologies, but do not need to be. Sometimes this is expressed as a tree, where gaining one tech unlocks multiple other techs, or it can be a track, where advancing along the track unlocks upgrades or new actions. So that's what tech trees and tech tracks look according to BGG.
Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty clear. I mean, I think any kind of gamer kind of understands the tech tree.
Yeah, that's true. But we're gonna dive deeply into it with our major examples. And if you have not listened to an episode of AP Table Talk in the past, what Brian and I like to do is we both have D20s right now, and we're gonna both roll them. Whoever rolls higher is gonna lead off our discussion on this section. So, Brian, I'm ready to roll when you are.
All right, I'm ready as well.
All right, count it off.
Right. Go ahead. I rolled.
All right. You rolled already. I have 16.
Yes. I got 8. So
all right.
You can go ahead and do. So our first one will be our kind of biggest or most noteworthy tech tree game.
Sure. All right. So I will lead off this one. So the question is most noteworthy / biggest tech tree game in our opinion. And I'm going to have to go with the one that I think Brian and I played the most, and it's going to be Beyond the Sun. We just completed a game on Board Game Arena right now. So for me, I remember, Brian, you introduced this game to me. You're like, we're going to play this game because it's essentially just tech trees. And I'm like, that's not a good selling point. Like, why else should we play this game? And you're like, no, trust me. We should play this game because it's tech trees. And I'm like, okay, we'll try it. And we tried it, and I really like it. I have the actual physical copy. We played it on BGA a ton. I just looked up your stats, Brian. I think you have an 88% win rate on Beyond the Sun, which just means I'm like, I'm never playing this game again. And I bet you a month from now I'll be like, yeah, we should play Beyond the Sun again. But for me, number one, because it like you said, Brian, it's the tech tree is a significant part of Beyond the Sun. It's not the only thing, but
it's like 80% of that game is a tech tree.
Yeah, it's built. That's the chassis that the game is built on. It's built around that tech tree. And then, like the definition, there's new opportunities for to explore different areas of the tree, but other parts of the game that are also included because the theme is like space exploration. So you can control other planets, you can control them, you can colonize them. There's an engine building aspect. The technologies, I think, that you research really open up your options or limit you to a very specific path. Again, depending on how you want to use the tech tree, because it's a common element in the game. Also, what I really like about it is that it's not conflict heavy. Like there is conflict in the game. I don't think you can get around the game without it, but
Right.
it works very well with the Euro crowd in that conflict is basically just, well, my spaceships are more powerful on this planet, so I control the planet and I'll colonize it before you. But other than that, it's not really a war game. I'd say it's more of a tech tree focused game and an engine building game more than anything else.
Right. And I feel even the conflict that's there, the mitigation to kind of the punishment of losing that they put in. So in Beyond the Sun, you kind of race to colonize some planets. So you have your ships on each of the planets. If someone colonizes before you, since it's not battle, you don't lose your ships. They just kind of move into a central location. So it doesn't feel like a complete loss, especially if you're in that lower planet, because it kind of pushes you up closer to the other planets.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I agree. Like it's very minimal direct conflict.
Yeah. Although I did play the game once in person with 3 players, and the map, the space map is completely different. So when I did play with 3,
yeah, that is what changes.
Yeah, it's completely different. I would still say that the game works well with all player counts. Although I think the most I've ever played it with 3. I think it'll go up to 4, but it's enjoyable. I really like it. It's my number 1.
Yeah, that's definitely a game I like as well. It was on my short list for this section.
Nice.
But the one I put in was so I kind of generally decided I was putting in a 4X game. So for those unfamiliar, 4X is kind of civilization games. 4X stands for explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. So I always think of civilization. Mainly I grew up with the video game, and I haven't played the civilization board game. So the one I put in is actually Eclipse. Which actually has an interesting twist on a tech tree. It doesn't have your typical it almost doesn't actually fit our definition that we talked about, but I would still call it a tech tree. It gives you that feeling, and part of it was the designer's he wanted to have something more flexible for this type of for a board game. So the technologies are randomly drawn each game, and they fit into each category, and there isn't necessarily a prerequisite in the sense of you need this technology before you get this other one. So in typical civilization games, for example, you would need to research the wheel before you researched cars or something like that. But because these are all these kind of futuristic sci-fi technologies, he decided, well, you know what? There's no precedence here. So you can research them in any order. They just have a research cost. And the way to feel the progression in that game is that there's 3 categories of technologies. And as you research more into one category, you get a discount. And so that the more you did military research, for example, the cheaper your military research will be. So you can specialize and go down one track, or you can kind of diversify, but it's going to be more expensive.
Right. So based on that, and it's been a while since I played Eclipse, Brian, is that it sounds more like a tech track than anything. There's like
like separate tech tracks, yes.
Right. And then you could say like as you specialize, you just get a discount. So you're encouraged to specialize, I guess, with Eclipse.
You're encouraged to specialize from a cost standpoint, but you also get points depending on how far you make it in each track. So there are rewards for diversifying as well. So
I see.
It gives you it kind of gives you some flexibility in how you want to play.
Yeah.
And it kind of eliminates the, actually, you know what? I'll probably come back to this in other parts of in our discussion today. So maybe we'll just move on for now, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay. So
that was my one for the most noteworthy. Yeah.
Okay. We'll go on to number 2 here.
Yeah. So your first tech tree game that you played.
Okay. So I was looking for other examples here because once I talked about Beyond the Sun, I'm like, okay, well, that is a game about tech trees. What other games have tech trees or tech tracks that I could talk about? So my number 2 example was for the first tech tree game I listed here is Scythe. And I went with Scythe because it's not what I think other people would call as the quintessential tech tree or track game. But what I like about it, and after further investigation and discussion, if you look at those individual player maps and then you see that upgrade action, you can kind of see the connection here, where you'll spend resources or actions early on in the game to upgrade an action. So later on, when you take that action, it costs less, or gives you additional benefits later down the road. And when I first learned how to play Scythe, that was a very unfamiliar and alien concept for me. But now I feel like it just works so well, because even if you look at it from a component standpoint, you're just moving the component around on the board, and that component covers up or uncovers different things that allow you to take a more powerful action later on. So that's my number 2 for the first one I've ever played.
Yeah, that's another one of our favorite games, I think, both of us. Yeah, I had a lot of similar games on my list. I did not have that one as first in my first tech tree games. And I was trying to think of my first board game tech tree, because again, my brain immediately goes to video games when I think of tech trees. So I was having trouble figuring out which was the first one, but I came down to, I believe that the first tech tree game I played was Seven Wonders.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And again, not your typical tech tree. It's almost kind of mixed in with like a tableau building tech tree. Whereas if you have certain prerequisites when you draft your cards, you can get things for free or discounts or whatnot. So, and that is kind of one of the old, more classic games. So that might be one of the earlier tech tree games, I guess, besides that aren't 4X games.
Well, yeah. I mean, now that you bring it up, I think I played Seven Wonders before I played Scythe, so that might be my first one. But
maybe, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to know what your first one was.
Right.
Yeah.
All
right. So now moving on to your favorite tech tree game.
All right. So this is number 3.
So both of the ones you've named, I thought were contenders for you to put as your favorite tech tree game, because I know you're a big fan of both of those games.
Yeah, I am. But actually, the number 1 I listed for my favorite one was, and we talked about this prior to us recording this episode, where like the amount of time and effort that goes into bringing new games to the table can often be arduous. So for number 3, what I listed as my favorite one, and Brian and I, we played a bunch of these, and I played a lot of these games in person online, is Age of Civilization. Because I have the physical copy. Brian and I played, like, I think at least a dozen games on BGA, because it's so fast. And because it's fast and because you're limited with the number of turns, every action you take in the game is consequential. But it comes at a cost. And I would say that one of the costs is, if you play the base game, everyone's working with the same tech tree. There's no like hidden techs. Everyone has to progress the same way. That's always the same for the base game. But I also feel like it's approachable, because if you're teaching the game to someone, you can just say like, hey, listen, these are the 9 things you can research, over the course of the game. Everyone's got the same thing. And then, people generally understand, like, if you want this at the very top, you have to research the 2 below it, or, take the Y direction through the middle, or anything else. I think, though, that, like, as you and I have discovered, if you play it a lot, it can get stale, even if you use the expansions, which I think are pretty cool. But I still like its approachability, and that's why Age of Civilization is my number 1 tech tree game.
Yeah, actually, that one was a surprise one, because we started playing that as one of our games to research for this episode. Yeah. And I was surprised how much I liked it. It was for the depth, for the length of time, was just about right. I do agree. I mean, we went pretty hard into it and played a lot, so I did get a little tired by the end, but I could definitely see myself going back to that one. I enjoyed it. So, sorry, the tech tree, I know when we played, because that was my first time playing, was on BGA with you. So swapping out, I know you can pay that $1 to swap out portions of your tech tree. So that is an expansion?
That's an expansion, yeah.
Okay, yes. Because I do like that.
I feel like that would be necessary to prevent the game from getting stale.
Yeah, and I think once you've introduced that, it would be hard to go back to playing without that.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what about you, Brian? What's your number, number 1?
My favorite tech tree game, and I did go with my favorite kind of tech tree centric game, as opposed to my favorite game that just happens to have a tech tree in it. And I went with Beyond the Sun, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Because again, it was, as we talked about earlier, as soon as I saw this game and looked at some playthroughs, I'm like, this game is a big tech tree, and I enjoy tech trees.
Yep.
So I can't think of a better game that is just essentially really a tech tree.
I mean, it is what it is, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't mince words about what it does.
I like that it,
yeah.
and it's almost infinitely evolving tech tree as well, because it's kind of randomly distributed. So,
Right.
and I'm wondering, I don't think I've seen any sort of expansion talk for it, but it would be easy to just throw more tech in there.
Yeah.
Or even just give you a new board of how the techs unlock kind of thing, or whatnot. But
the expansions I'm chasing right now that I have up for Want and Trade are like there are additional techs, the cards, and like additional planets, and I feel like that's just a very simple addition to make, because you're printing new cards. You know,
kind of perfect for what that game is.
Yeah.
So there are some in the works then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're available now. I just don't know how available they are to get these expansions. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, again, that could just adding those extra cards could give a lot more life to that game if you've played it. I mean, I don't feel like I've overplayed it, but if you're at that point, like, I could see how just adding a few more tech, a few more planets, and suddenly it's fresh again.
Right. Cool.
All right. Okay. So that is our major examples of tech tree games. So we can move on to our next segment.
Yes. So for our next segment, if you've listened to AP Table Talk before, this is usually the part where Brian and I like to talk about our likes and dislikes for the game. But we decided to change it up. For this episode, we are going to be talking about different aspects of the mechanic. And these aspects are different thematic elements that we've kind of identified after playing a bunch of games with tech trees and tech tracks, and also analyzing the mechanic a little bit. So we are going to lead off this section with a dice roll again. I have about 8 of these shared aspects. Brian and I will be addressing some of them. Brian may or may not be using the same list, but we're going to go through this list sequentially and discuss it in turn. And then, Brian, with this one, we're gonna lead off with the die roll again. Is that right?
All right. Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
So roll in 3, 2, 1.
All right. I've got a 6. My rolls are not so great today.
I have a 5.
Okay. All right. All right. So the first aspect on the list here I have is progression or achievement. And I see that as the kind of the sense of what the tech tree or tech track can give you is, as you're playing, you get that sense of achievement that you're progressing, that you're growing either it's your character or your civilization. Yep. Or whatever it is that your representation in the game is having that those kind of small accomplishments that keep you motivated in the game.
Right.
So I would say that. So one thing we're going to do is, for each aspect, we'll kind of say if that's something that we like or dislike about that aspect in terms of board games for us. So that is definitely something that I like about tech trees in board games.
So again, I think we echo a lot of the same sentiment here. I like the progression and achievement aspect, because it is it's a very visual way of representing how you're moving in the game. Again, I go back to my example of Age of Civilization, because there is a tech tree there. Those techs, if you're playing the base game, are open. Everyone's got the same tech tree. It's not that big, but the original, like the first 3 techs are kind of engine building meaning that they give specific actions like a little bit of a discount or a little bit of an addition. So, again, I like that aspect. It's very transparent. It shows that you're moving in the game. It shows that you're getting discounts or further improved actions later on. And it's just a really great way of visually representing what players are doing, what they're building in the game. So I think that's a quintessential and critical aspect of tech trees.
All right. Yeah. So you want to lead off on our second aspect there?
Yeah, sure. So our second aspect here is depth and strategy. For every aspect here, Brian, I also tried to link it with a particular game in order to give our listeners some additional insight on what I'm thinking about here. So depth and strategy, I think, are very well linked to tech trees, because the game can be made very, very modular from here. And we talked about this with Beyond the Sun, which is, again, the game I'm going to reference here. So the starting technologies in Beyond the Sun are all basically the same. However, where they get placed on the tech tree, and I'm going to tell I'm going to tell listeners this, if you have not played Beyond the Sun before, but the tech tree is not symmetrical. So there are certain parts of the tech tree which give closer access to level 2, level 3, and level 4 tech. So they're not the four starting technologies are always the same, but where they're placed in the tech tree are different, and that gives you a little bit of depth and strategy. In addition to like which player goes first, because initiative I think is also important beyond the sun. Further technologies also get better and better, but with added cost because it requires dependencies in order to research them. And Brian and I have never played it before, but there is an aspect of Beyond the Sun where the tech trees are not set from a deck, because if you play the base game right now, you just draw different techs from a deck, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 techs. But there's actually like a grid, a matrix you can make so that what techs are coming up and you can draft them before your opponents can. So
it gives you a little more ability to plan ahead then?
Yeah, because you can see like, oh, for this game, these are the level 4 techs, and we know that they're going to come up. It's up to us to determine who's going to get it first, basically, with initiative. But I think that, with tech tree games, and especially Beyond the Sun, this adds a lot of opportunity to increase your depth and strategy.
Yeah, definitely agree. I like that you get these different paths to victory. You can choose kind of, do you want to go heavy on one branch or the other? Or I guess an example that I can think of is Tapestry, which as opposed to tech trees, I would say it has 4 tech tracks. And you can kind of go heavy on 1 or 2 or all. You can try to go to all of them. And it's kind of a trade-off to choose between them. And it kind of gives some interesting decisions there.
Yeah.
Where you want to spend your resources.
In general.
In general. To get whatever advantages you can find with them.
Tapestry is one of those games that we also started playing on BGA. I think I played the game once in person, and then every single play after that has been on BGA. But it also just reached a point for us, Brian. I don't know if you felt the same when I was like, I think I'm just done with this game. Like, I think I got as much out of this game as I'm going to get. It's not my favorite game. And there are other games I think I'd rather play, but I think I'm okay with it. Like, I got as much out of it as possible.
Yeah, I know they have had some expansions. I wouldn't mind trying it again at different player counts to see if that kind of felt different.
Yeah.
But I think we had played quite a few 2-player games, just me and you, and it was just like, okay, yeah, I enjoyed it. But I was kind of just done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another one that felt very much the way I felt after Age of Civilizations.
Right. All right, should we go into number 3, Brian, with dependencies?
Number 3. So dependencies. So this one I kind of lumped in with a future topic here, but so dependencies meaning like I guess that each kind of node on the tech track or tech tree has a prerequisite of something else, and so to me, this adds some complexity in the sense that you need to kind of build up to those better powers or better abilities that get unlocked. Yeah. So it adds to that feeling that you're growing kind of, or you're getting more powerful in a game. So I do like that. But for some people, could add some complexity in strategy in kind of determining the path you want to take and whether or not you want, maybe there's like 4 steps beforehand where you don't really care about those things, but you really want that 5th step. So you're just gonna do it anyways and go through those kind of dependencies to get to that. So that can be kind of middling for me, as like sometimes it's like that trade-off, but it does give you an interesting choice. So
yeah, that's true. And I'd say that particularly when you're talking about tech trees with like a traditional symmetrical tree, you need usually those dependencies in order to research something that's further up on the tech tree. My game that I am using for the example here is Scythe, because just like Age of Civilization, it provides a clear hierarchy of what you need to do to accomplish something before proceeding. And I'm talking about just like the upgrade action, where you're moving a component from the top of your player board to the bottom of the player board. And what I think is cool here is that, again, because it's component limited, you're basically uncovering one part of your board, covering up a different part of the board. So an action later produces, more of a commodity, and it requires less of a commodity in order to take a bottom row action later. But what I particularly like about Scythe here is that I think you said it best, Brian, when we first played it in person, is that like you never want to be in a position where you can only take one of your actions. You know, you always want to be able to take both, because the game is very much about like your action economy. If you can only take one, it's like a waste. You know, you're only using 50% of your abilities at that point. And I really like that aspect of Scythe. And again, it's not a tech tree in its traditional format, but more of a tech track where you're, you know, again, uncovering something and covering up something else. And I just think it's done really, you know, well and elegantly in that format.
Yeah, I remember when you first introduced me to Scythe, and that upgrade system, and I don't think I've seen another game use that system.
No,
where you kind of uncover one section and cover it, and I think it's great. Like it just works so well in that game.
Yeah.
All right, so on to asymmetry.
Yeah. You want to lead off this?
Sure. Okay. So asymmetry. So yeah, again, just by its nature of a tech tree, because you can choose those different paths as you progress through the game, players may be at different points in that path, so you can have very different abilities, very different goals, immediate goals. The one that kind of comes to mind that I can think of, going back to my 4X example of Eclipse, and I'll just focus on one aspect of that tech is, so a big part of that is upgrading your ships and kind of building your fleet, your spaceships. And yeah, as you play that and you upgrade them with your different tech that you unlock, one character or one race can be very firepower heavy, whereas another one can focus on speed or stealth, and it just, even though they started with the same abilities, can be drastically different partway through the game. And I definitely like that. I like my games have lots of asymmetric powers and things like that. And this kind of, even though you can start non-asymmetric, I mean, that game you can choose either way, but it gives you that path that you can kind of tailor it either the way you think is most advantageous or the way you like to play, and that kind of thing.
Going back to Eclipse though, so you played it in person only?
Yes.
Did you play with the mod with the missiles? Because I remember that was a point of contention.
We discussed because we had read a forum post about it, and we decided for the first play we'll play the rules as written.
Okay.
And I immediately loaded up
You need missiles.
one type of my ships with a bunch of missiles,
right?
So that I could just annihilate people.
So if you're listening and you're totally confused about this conversation, the reason I bring this up is because, like Brian said, with the ships in the ships in Eclipse, you can upgrade, and the main weapons are like phasers, like lasers, right, and missiles. But like operating the ship needs energy, and your phasers need energy as well, but missiles do not. So yes, I learned from my first, what's that, Brian?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say the trade-off is that missiles are a one-time use.
Oh, they're one-time use. Okay.
So when you engage in a battle, you can use the missiles one time, right, in the start of the battle, and after that, you can't use them anymore. But I put them on my lowest cost ship, my little scout ships, and I just loaded as many as I could onto them, so that I could just alpha strike every combat. And if I lost them, then they were my least costly ship.
But if I remember correctly, Brian, wasn't there also an upgrade, like targeting computer, where you hit on any roll, like you're always going to hit?
At least in the so I played the I don't know if it's the newest version at this time, which is
third edition, I think.
I can't remember what it is, but it's I think it's the third edition. And in that one, so there are upgrades, targeting computer, which essentially, so you hit on certain numbers, and the defender can have technology that reduces dice numbers down, and the attacker can have technology that can increase the dice number that they are.
Oh, I see.
And certain number, like a certain number of dice and a certain type of dice. There's different colored dice that get rolled depending on the weapon,
right,
that have more or less hits and whatnot. So you can increase your chance to hits. I don't know if there's anything that guarantees hits. But depending on what you're fighting, your hits may be guaranteed just because of the fact they don't have a lot of defense.
Right. Well, I remember just getting obliterated by one of my opponents that just went heavy on missiles like you did, and I'm like, I can't defend against this. I'm going to lose all my capital ships now.
Yeah. It's it is definitely a strategy that you would have to prepare for.
Right.
And I haven't played enough to really say whether I think it's balanced or unbalanced, but I know that the debate continues. So.
Right. So that was a very wide tangent. We'll go back to asymmetry. So you talked about asymmetry, Brian, in relation to Eclipse and building the ships. I'm going to talk about asymmetry again, going back to Scythe. And talking about specific actions. So like an action in Scythe that you can take is build. You can build buildings. There are different buildings in Scythe. But what I like about the tree here is that you can make your build action very efficient, cost efficient, in that you're using less wood, which I believe is a resource. But the building you build is going to be, I think, a very tactical choice in that, you could build a windmill, which gives you additional produce function. You could build a mine, which gives you access to the map. I think that there's a lot of asymmetry already inside in terms of like your industrial mat and your faction mat and your starting locations and starting resource and everything. There's like a lot of complexity there. But what I like, and I'm using for the example here, is that build function, because everyone's got access to build. But your build may be more important if you're stuck in a particular part of the map and you need to build a mine really to get out and start, exploring a little bit. Whereas my build might be like, well, I have a very weak produce, so I need like a windmill in order to make up for my lack of workers. And that's where I think that this asymmetry area really makes it so that, there's a lot more. You may play the game a lot, but there's still room for interesting decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of situational on adding situational kind of awareness on which path you want to go for upgrades and whatnot.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. You wanna start on the next one?
All right. So for number 5 here, I have balance, and I'm gonna name a game that we have not yet talked about yet. And Brian, I don't think you've played, but it's one of my favorite games called Endeavor: Age of Sail. Have you played that game?
I have not.
Okay. This is out of Burnt Island Games. I pledged for this on Kickstarter, I think years ago at this time. But Endeavor: Age of Sail is not a tech tree per se. It is specifically a tech track. So if I could say that Beyond the Sun was a tech tree centric game, Endeavor: Age of Sail is very much a tech track specific game. So here it's that all player boards have the same different tracks, and you're resolving actions on a main board, which gives you tokens, which makes your individual tech tracks more efficient or more powerful, and everything else. So everything works on these individual tracks, and those are all open information. People can see where you're weak in an area or strong in an area and everything else. And it makes it so that all of different players have access to that same information, but the way that you prioritize and explore different parts of the globe and the map and prioritize different tracks over something else gives you an incentive to proceed down one track versus another one. And it's one of my favorite games. It's one of those games I don't get on the table often, but I like it for the same reasons I like Beyond the Sun, because Beyond the Sun again focuses on the tree. This one focuses on the track.
Right. Yeah. So for balance, again, I think of, I guess this comes with asymmetry, is in a lot of games, especially larger scope, it becomes really hard to find these dominant strategies or things that become unbalanced after, hundreds of plays that, and these tech trees will be embedded in these games. So I think it could be a kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to implementing them into a game, and can really make a game hit or miss. And I am going to go back to what I was speaking about in Eclipse and the designer's choice to make this kind of randomized tech tree. And what I was talking about was his goal of giving you that feeling, because in these 4X games, they're kind of epic scope games, and giving you this feeling of these huge tech trees, but they're practically impossible to play test and to balance. So by having them become dynamic, and kind of everyone is sharing that same dynamic tech tree, it doesn't create one path that is kind of becomes the meta. Is like, oh well, you have to upgrade along this path because that's the most efficient. It kind of changes each game, which is something I really like. And I think he does bounce it. And now that I'm thinking of the game again, there are some basic texts that are always available to research. Just like some of the smaller weapons, things like that, so that at the early game, all those options are available.
Right.
And they don't just, you don't get a bad draw of tech tiles where it's like, oh, well, there's no weapons available at all.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine how that would kill your game of Eclipse if you had no weapons.
I do think that balancing can be difficult and can kind of make or break a game that is dependent on its tech tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So the next aspect I have on here is theme in relation to it. And I mean, to me, the obvious theme related to tech trees is kind of this idea to simulate scientific development, or as we talked about, researching. You need to research a wheel before you can research a car, kind of thing. And how accurate or inaccurate that is to real life, I do think that it does portray that very well, and games tend to use it in that way a lot as a development of a civilization or technology or research. And I mean, I'm one who likes my thematic games, so I definitely like when it's used in that sense. And again, you can look at any of the 4X games or any games that use it as research, researching knowledge or growing power for your character.
Right.
And it can be very thematic in that sense.
Yeah. I think that theme is also really important. And for the game that I'm referencing again, I'm going to reference this. I referenced it before. I'm going to reference it for the next section, is Endeavor Age of Sail.
Yep.
So the 4 tracks that I remember I listed here is industry, culture, wealth, and influence. And again, everyone has the same tracks. And these, you're looking at this from the perspective of a European, burgeoning power in the golden age of sail, which is between the 1550s and the 1850s. And here, since you are representing those individual European powers, you're looking to expand your industry, culture, wealth, and influence around the globe. So the other regions of the globe that you play in are North and South America, India, the Far East, Caribbean, and Africa. And there's more about this I want to talk about. I'm a big evangelist for this game, as you can tell. If you've never played Endeavor Age of Sail, I recommend you play it at least once, and I want to talk a little bit about it more in the educational aspect. But when it comes to theme, I'd say that this, pretty closely aligns the individual tracks with the overall theme of the game, which is an emerging European power.
Right. I mean, that's a good segue, I guess, into educational, and you're kind of the expert in this one, so I'll just briefly say that this ties in to theme with me. And again, thinking about it as technological advancements and things like that, it is a very almost obvious link to how it could be educational,
right?
As long as your tech tree is made to be accurate in that sense. But I'm going to let you go more in depth in this section, because again, you're kind of the expert in this area here.
On the educational part?
Yes.
Okay. So for Endeavor Age of Sail, like I said in the previous section, those 4 tracks: industry, culture, wealth, and influence. And you're always looking at this from the perspective of these emerging European powers. So there's some really good educational elements in here, and I've written about this in the past, and there's a lot of good literature about it, and I'll include it in the show notes for this particular episode. But without mincing words, this game is basically about colonization about different parts of the world, establishing governors in these different parts of the world that are based in that European superpower, and it also includes aspects of slavery which are included as part of an industrial complex. And because it's based on this thematic element, it's actually included very well in the game. So I know, Bri, you haven't played it before, but the way that the slavery aspect is included is it's one of the mechanics that's part of it's like part of the structural narrative of the game. It's part of like an industrial aspect, in that it's very easy to invest your superpower into slavery because it provides a very powerful economic driver. But what I think is an interesting aspect is, if another player ever reaches a point or an event for an abolish slavery card, all the other players that invested in slavery get negative point influences. So you can use it very early to increase your engine, but there's a thematic element that reduces victory points at the end for investing too far into it. And I want to point out that I think talking about colonization and talking about slavery overall is a very difficult topic, but I think that this game does it really well. And I'm going to include a link in the description for this particular episode on playing with Endeavor Age of Sail as an educational component, because I think it really demonstrates these concepts well and how it related to the overall implementation of colonization by Western powers throughout the world. And while it may have some, difficult elements to it, I still think, one, it's a very thematic game. Two, it's a very educational game. And three, it's a very fun game to play. And I keep telling people, you got to play more Endeavor Age of Sail, and I might play it this weekend.
Yeah, we're going to have to get this one to the table at some point.
Yeah, are you looking at pictures right now? Have you seen it?
No, I'm not right now, but I will. It's on my list to look up after. So
yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. I haven't played it in a few years now because I've been trying to get some other games off the list, but it's a good one. It's not one I'm willing to trade in any time in the near future.
All right. So, okay, the next one I've got on here is the addition of complexity to a game by introducing a tech tree. And again, dependencies is one aspect of that. And when I think about how a tech tree adds complexity is kind of in how it can be difficult for people to learn it a little bit better. There's a kind of a learning curve of understanding that tech tree. One other aspect that I do find in some games is it can make it very hard to determine or to evaluate the game state at any point, especially if people have their own tech trees. So I'll use Age of Civilization as an example. In games with tech trees, I tend to go heavy on research.
Yeah.
So I will look at that game and look at our tech tree portion of it and say, oh, well, I've got more research, so I'm doing better. But that's not necessarily true, because there are valid strategies of almost completely ignoring the tech tree. And they have ways of getting bonuses for that. So yeah, that can kind of muddy the waters a little bit in how you are able to evaluate the game state and where you stand in the game.
Yeah. I think that tech trees overall are their own level of complexity, and it may not be applicable for your game group to bring in a game that has a tech tree if people have not seen it before. And if they have not, you should start out with something relatively simple or fast, like Age of Civilization. But the game I actually reference here is we just finished our play today, Brian, on VJ, which is Space Station Phoenix.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot going on in that game, and I played the game a few times. It was on my list because I wanted to try it out. I don't think that this is a game I'd ever get to play in person. I don't think I'd ever want to buy it, and I don't know if anyone else has it. But essentially, this game has a tech track, and what it does, and tell me if you feel differently, Brian, which it basically just makes like you being able to take advantage of someone else's action. It has a follow.
So you're speaking of the diplomacy board.
Yeah,
right?
The diplomacy board, because
right.
I think that's essentially what it does.
Essentially their tech tracks.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know if it took me until later in the game to decide to try and push myself high up into it. I just decided I would stay ahead of you to get the bonuses.
Yeah.
And then realized that I could have been getting better bonuses, but it was kind of late in the game at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a tech track, but a very simple tech track.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is the only complexity it adds. It's basically just like, do you want to go up on the diplomacy board? Because by doing so, you're basically going to be able to piggyback on other people's actions. And if you can look at me and say like, oh, I think Dave's going to do a lot of building, in this game. He has the ability to build a lot of things. I should get ahead of him on that track. So whenever he takes that action, I get something from it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Which is like, when you talk about complexity, I think is a rather simple concept to share. So I think that the tech tree or track in this game, adds that complexity. It's not overwhelming. That's why I referenced it in this area. Yes.
The tech tree specifically for that game, because that game had a lot to it.
Yeah.
I think I thought I was doing pretty well. So for the record here, I lost that game pretty handily, I think. I thought I was doing pretty good, but so for the listeners, when we play a new game, especially if it's a more complex one, I don't know about you, Dave, I tend to just skim the rules and I figure I'll just learn it as we go.
Yeah.
But I think the problem in that one was I thought I was doing pretty good, but I did not pay attention to the end game scoring.
Oh, yeah.
Which added I think it tripled or quadrupled our scores. So
yeah, based on the actions we took.
Yeah. So that definitely was to my detriment there.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't played it before, the best way I can explain it is that Space Station Phoenix it's an engine building game with tech tracks, and you get a bunch of ships at the beginning, and those ships allow you to take actions. But ultimately, you want to cannibalize those ships to get metal to build out your space station, because your space station is how you end up, building your engine and also scoring points at the end. So, like building sections, Bri, are like a really good way of earning points, but also like getting up on that diplomacy track so that you can take advantage of other people's actions. There's just many different ways to score points, and you just don't know about it until like the very end when everything gets tallied.
Yeah, I did like the thematic aspects of that, kind of cannibalizing the ships
to make your space station.
That was kind of neat. Yeah. I like that.
Oh, you know why I wouldn't get it is because it takes up a ton of table space, because you have all those cards out and all the space
even on
station
BGA
points.
you can only look at sections of the game at a time.
Yeah, I was like, I don't even have enough monitor real estate. There's no way I'm gonna have table real estate for this game. So no, right. It's a pass for me.
Yeah, no, BGA, that's how I'll play that one.
Yeah. All right, should we go into number 9 here? I think did you combine this one?
Which one was this? This is the downtime and kind of analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Our namesake here of our show.
Yep.
So I mean, I didn't combine it, but it is linked, I think, to complexity in the sense that once it becomes too complex, you kind of introduce, too many choices, too much time for planning, which can lead to big downtime, especially if you have like huge complex tech trees. One of the things we were talking about Beyond the Sun, that variant where all the tech that's going to come. And I think that while that's interesting, I think that should only be to seasoned players of that game.
Yeah.
Because I could definitely even see myself, like, I don't feel that I've played it enough where like, there's going to be a lot more downtime if I know all the tech tracks. I like that that game is it's not, I would say that's in the middle there. It's not too complex, but it's not too simple either.
Yeah.
But I think the game plays pretty quickly, and part of that is because you only have limited information about what that tech tree is going to come ahead.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times I'm just like, I want to research something else, and I almost kind of like that unknown of what you're going to get when you flip the card over. So
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
It's not always completely unknown because you get to see what the previous tech was, and then
you get the categories. Yeah. Which is just enough information to make kind of a decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind trying it the other way, but I like the way it is with kind of not fully knowing what that next tech will be.
Yeah, I agree. My aspect for downtime and analysis paralysis, I'm going to flip this because I had played a bunch of games of Space Station Phoenix, and I played Brian on BGA, totally hosed him, which felt great. But the opposite is Brian and I tried to play Gaia Project on VGA. And I remember we played it at PAX Unplugged, either the first year or the second year. And we were like, you know what? Like, this game is highly rated. We learned from the rule book. Took a while because it's not an easy game. We played, I think, maybe half of it. And we're like, I'm hungry. I don't think we can stay for the rest.
I just think our learning phase took a long time. I think we got close to finishing it, and then we just rushed the last couple rounds.
Oh, so we did finish that game.
I think we did. We rushed it. I think it was closing. Like they were kicking us out.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's why.
I still enjoy that game, but yeah, it's definitely a heavier weight one.
Well, I thought that I could like just pick it up after we left it off, and I didn't watch anything. So we were just playing, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll build a mine because that's what I can do right now. I don't know if mines are important or anything else. So I'm just like, when we were playing that game Brian on VGA, I'm just like, I'm just going to do whatever I can right now. I don't know if it's the best move, but I know I can build a mine. So you know what? A mine's going to get built. But I mean, I think this goes further down a rabbit hole where, like, I'm a seasoned game player. Despite the fact that I did not do any research for Gaia Project, I was very lost. I can't imagine if someone who's never played any games with tech trees is approaching a game with a tech tree for the first time. So there is an opportunity to have a lot of analysis paralysis, especially in a game that has like a lot of downtime because of that time you need to make a good decision.
Yeah, I mean, the tech tree itself isn't too bad. It's really just the buildings, I think, in that game is the tech tree. But there's a lot of gears in that game, a lot of spinning wheels. So I wouldn't recommend it to a new gamer.
No.
Okay, so I think that wraps up everything I've got for our aspects segment.
Yeah, same thing for me. Should we go on to the next segment?
So yeah, our twists and variations. So I don't have too much this time in here. I've got a little bit.
Are we going to roll the dice for initiative?
Yeah, should we do our roll for initiative?
All right. So I'm going to roll.
Count it off.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right. I got a 6 again.
All right. I got 8.
All right.
Just barely.
So go ahead and start us off there.
All right. So for twists and variations, my number 1 here, I'm calling it global and personal state for tech trees and tracks. So I would like to see a new game or new games in the future that play with different versions of global tech trees and tracks and personal ones. So when I say that, I'm talking about like in Age of Civilization, everyone has the same tech track, but it is a personal track. Whereas in Beyond the Sun, it is a public tech track, but not everyone may have access to it. And I would like to see a kind of a mix up between global tech trees and personal tech trees or tech tracks. And in some kind of combination, like maybe you could use the tech of someone else on their personal tech track, or, not everyone has access to a global one or something else like that. I think that the availability of where that tech tree is and how you get access to it would add a lot of diversity to, I think, what's offered right now. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to video games a little bit, because what that makes me think of is kind of every civilization has the same tech track, and they're researching, but they could be at different points of researching it. But through espionage, you can steal technology. I think that would be one way to kind of introduce the element you're speaking of being able to kind of use someone else's tech tree, even though you have your own state of the tech tree.
Right. And I think there's something like that in Manhattan Project, right?
Oh, when we played
yes,
you're right.
There's the espionage component where you can use someone else's technology.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one too. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
So I had a similar point here, the shared tech tracks. So we spoke about Tapestry. Another one is Lost Ruins of Arnak, has the shared research track there, where I think it's the first person to hit certain points gets a bonus and things like that. I think actually Tapestry does that as well, right?
Yeah, first I think so. But it's not every spot. It's like at certain milestones.
Right. So yeah, I had it's kind of the same thing of between shared or personal tracks, and it could be shared unique tech trees or shared tech trees that are the same and that thing. So yeah, I had that point. I'll go on to my next one.
Okay.
You see a lot of variation in tech trees kind of mixed with, in one of my examples, Seven Wonders, I talked about kind of tableau building and tech trees. And another big game that has that element is Terraforming Mars. Is another one where you're it's more of a tableau building, but it gives you that, if you have these cards out, you can get special abilities or unlock special things because you have specific tech out.
Right. And did you have something else for that, Brian? Because I'll go in my second.
No, go ahead.
So I think mine builds off a little bit on that, which is I call it expansion of decisions based on player actions. And the game I like to reference here is Lords of Waterdeep, which we played a lot of on Steam, actually. And what I like about that game is, one, I think it's just like Beyond the Sun is a quintessential tech tree. I think Lords of Waterdeep for me is a quintessential a worker placement. And here you can expand those worker spots by building those buildings, meaning that, like if it's Brian's building and I choose to send a worker there, Brian gets a bonus and I get my worker action and something else like that. So I think that, I would like to see something kind of like with Space Station Phoenix and kind of like Beyond the Sun, where if you research a tech, first you get a little bit of a bonus, which Beyond the Sun has like event cards that happen that kind of do that right now. But until you research that tech yourself, like you could use that tech and you could get that benefit, but the person that reached it first or has it right now would also get sort of like a follow action. So, I think that provides a little bit more, like synergy in play in that, everyone's kind of getting something whenever you do something, which I usually like in games, because it feels like you are kind of contributing to the progression of the game overall.
Yeah, and we talk about this kind of first, this kind of bonus for being first. I think in Beyond the Sun, the kind of inherent bonus is just being able to choose. If it's one of those spots where the two different categories line up, being able to choose that in itself is a bonus, because you can tailor the tech tree to either benefit you or kind of try to hinder your opponents.
Right. And I forgot to bring up before, Brad, because you talked about video games. The one video game that I always reference the tech tree for, that I actually didn't write in my notes because I forgot to write it down, was, did you play the original Dead Space? I think it was like 2010. So Dead Space, if you're listening to this and you have not played it before, it's a survival horror game set in space. If you've seen Event Horizon, I feel like it's Event Horizon the game. But like all the weapons are upgradable. And I remember when I played the first game, you have to pick up nodes in the game to upgrade your weapon. But the way you upgrade them is a little tree. And once you commit down to a spot, you're really limiting like how you want to upgrade this weapon. So for me in survival horrors, I get panicky and I just spam shots. So for me, I'm like, power means nothing. I just want as large a magazine as possible. So whenever I get scared, I can just start spamming spots. But once you do that, it's like, okay, well, you're sacrificing power now for just additional ammo. And I thought that was kind of cool because, like, that gives you a little bit more insight on how you want to upgrade your weapon. And I know I'd seen tech trees in other games before, but that one for Dead Space really sticks out to me.
So I can't think of a specific game that functions like this, but that kind of made me think of kind of introducing almost a legacy element to a tech tree. And I'm thinking of the game I'm thinking of as again, a video game. I'm forgetting the name. Maybe you can remind me. I think you introduced me to it. They did make a board game. It's a deck builder roguelike game.
Is it Slay the Spire?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. So where you can, again, not specifically talking about in that game, but it makes me think of that game where it's like maybe a game where you can research up a tech tree or progress up a tech tree for a game, and then that tech tree can persist through multiple plays.
Yep.
And I'm sure there must be games that do that.
I'm sure there are. I just can't think of any.
Can't think of anything right now.
Yeah, and I know in Slay the Spire, as you play, you unlock different cards which can be included in your deck.
So it kind of it changes your I guess your opportunity of what could be in your deck as you go along.
Yeah,
again, that's another way that it could change through each playthrough. You can unlock branches to a tech tree and that kind of thing. So some type of legacy aspect would be kind of neat.
Yeah, that would be cool. I haven't seen that yet, but I'd like to. And I think also Slay the Spire has a tabletop game now. I remember seeing it on Kickstarter.
I know I saw that, but I'm like, but it works so good in the video games. Like,
yeah, but that's the thing. Like,
no bookkeeping.
I don't want to do that bookkeeping in person. The game just does it for me.
Yeah.
So I got a third one, Brian. You want to go talk about this one, or should I go?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So mine, and we talked a little bit about this before when we were discussing Space Station Phoenix. My number 3 is constructive and deconstructive tech trees and tracks. So with Space Station Phoenix, we talked about it before. You have a set of cards, and those cards are your ships, and their ships have actions. But ultimately, you want to use your ships to take actions that allow you to increase your engine and start building different aspects to your space station in Space Station Phoenix. But ultimately, as the game goes on, you want to cannibalize those ships in order to build your space station. So you're actually like, you're deconstructing your engine as you go on.
Right.
And I kind of see this with, Brian, remember we played Flamme Rouge, I think at one of the PAXs, which I thought was, I like deck builders. And I thought this was a really interesting example that it was also highly thematic because if you're thinking about it, as you are cycling, you get tired. So you don't have these fast sprint cards and everything else. So I think Space Station Phoenix functions in a lot of the same way that Flamme Rouge does, which means that you basically need to recycle your cards. Like in Flamme Rouge, you have to. In Space Station Phoenix, you don't have to, but you will lose out on a bunch of points. And I think that, future games that take advantage of that deconstructive element would be cool to see.
Yeah, that's definitely one. I'm trying to think of another implementation of like maybe some type of sabotage to an opponent's tech tree. Would be a neat way to implement that in a different way.
Sabotage, where you just start cannibalizing their ships or cars or something like that.
So you can research. I mean, maybe this is just because I think of games in the sense that I want that direct conflict all the time. So you research this new technology. I can go in and just make it or block off a branch of your tech tree or something like that. Would be interesting to me. But I'm sure a lot of gamers would absolutely hate that.
Maybe you can block up a branch on like the global tech tree, but like my personal tech tree.
I guess it doesn't need to be permanent or just. Actually, you know what? Beyond the Sun does this to a very small degree, where you can some of those event cards where you can make a technology cost more to research in the future. So that is it to a very minimal extent, which is probably better. Again, that they're not going for a heavy conflict game. So. No. And like, it's not an apt comparison between Eclipse and Beyond the Sun, but I would rather play Beyond the Sun than Eclipse. Like the whole shipbuilding conflict part, rolling tons of dice wasn't very favorable to me. Yeah, I definitely like, I mean, I like both of those games, but I do like my conflict. So
yeah, that's true. But I mean, as of recording this, we were talking about playing Twilight Imperium on BGA. And Brian, you're like, we have to play it real time, otherwise it'll take over a year to play a game.
And we'll have to find more. I don't think it's going to work at 2 players.
No, we're going to have to find.
Because it's a heavy negotiation game.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know how it's going to work out, but we'll try it out.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for the Twists and Variations.
Yeah, I talked about my 3 as well.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps up our Tech Tree episode of AP Table Talk. If you'd like to hear more content like this, please be sure to subscribe. You can also check out more of our content, projects, and other information about us at universityxp.com.
Thanks for joining us. We'd also love it if you took some time to rate the show. We live to lift others with learning, so if you found this episode useful, consider sharing it with someone who could also benefit. Until next time, game on.